The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on when 16-year-old Emily Carter stepped off the school bus, unaware that this would be the last ordinary moment of her life. Emily lived in Rosewood Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood where most evenings passed with the soft hum of sprinklers and the chatter of families settling in for dinner. She was known for her gentle personality, her love of sketching, and the hopeful way she spoke about attending art school one day. To most people, Emily was simply a bright, kind-hearted teenager with her whole future ahead of her. But on this particular afternoon, a group of boys from a neighboring school had been roaming the area with a dangerous intention, searching for someone vulnerable, someone alone. These boys, all between 16 and 17, had already been drifting into darker behavior for months, thrill-seeking, reckless meetings in abandoned lots, and a growing need to exert power over others. Their ringleader, Dylan Marsh, carried himself with a confidence that hid a deeply troubled home life. The others, Brent, Logan, and Kyle, followed him the way moths follow a flame, eager for approval, terrified of losing their place within the group. Emily didn't notice the boys at first. She walked calmly along the sidewalk, adjusting her backpack strap as a cool breeze pushed through the trees. She was thinking about a sketch she wanted to finish later that evening, a meadow scene inspired by a photograph she had torn from a magazine. She had promised her mother she'd be home by 6. Behind her, the boys lingered near the corner store, watching her. Dylan said quietly, nodding in Emily's direction. The others exchanged uneasy looks. They had talked big for weeks, all bluster and bravado, but now a real target stood in front of them, a girl who didn't know they existed, a girl who had done nothing except walk home like she always did. Still, none of them challenged Dylan. They followed as he stepped into the fading sunlight and moved toward Emily with deliberate steps. Emily sensed something behind her only when shadows stretched too close. She turned, startled, as the boys closed in. "Hey," Dylan said with a forced friendliness. "You dropped something." She glanced down. Nothing was there. Before she could respond, Brent stepped behind her, blocking her path. Logan shifted left. Kyle moved right. Emily's heart began to race, her instincts warning her of danger she didn't yet understand. I need to go home," she murmured, trying to step around them. Dylan's grin tightened. "It'll just take a minute." Moments later, the quiet suburb fell away as Emily was forced toward a waiting car parked behind a row of hedges. Her phone slipped from her hand and landed silently in the grass, unnoticed by the boys, unseen by passing neighbors. A dog barked in the distance. A door slammed. And Emily Carter, who had been planning nothing more than an evening of homework and sketching, vanished into the growing dusk, her absence unnoticed by the world for the first of many agonizing hours. Emily's disappearance should have caused immediate alarm, but the first critical hours slipped by quietly. Her phone, lying in the grass where it fell, buzzed with unanswered messages from her mother asking when she would be home. By nightfall, the battery died in silence. Meanwhile, Emily was driven across town to a small, run-down house on the edge of an industrial district. The boys called it the clubhouse, a place where they gathered to drink, brag, and hide from the world. It belonged to Brent's older cousin, who was rarely there and didn't care what they did as long as no neighbors complained. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and the lingering smell of old cigarettes. A single lamp cast a yellow glow across the living room where boxes and broken furniture were pushed against the walls. The boys shoved Emily inside, locking the door behind them. "Sit," Dylan ordered. Emily did, trembling violently. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please. I just want to go home." For a moment, a single, flickering moment, even Dylan hesitated. She looked so small, sitting on the worn-out couch with her backpack still on, eyes wide with fear. But the hesitation passed. Power dulled his uncertainty, and the others, too afraid to challenge him, fell in line. "This is just for tonight," Logan muttered, more to reassure himself than her. We just need to figure things out." But nothing about their plan involved letting her go. Hours passed as the boys took turns watching her. Emily begged, cried, promised she wouldn't tell anyone. Her pleas echoed through the cramped rooms but fell on ears divided between guilt and toxic bravado. When Emily tried to run, bolting for the back door the moment Kyle turned away, Dylan grabbed her, pulling her back with a force that stunned everyone. She hit the floor hard. The room fell silent except for her ragged breathing. "Try that again," Dylan said coldly, "and you'll regret it." From that point forward, the tone in the house shifted. The boys no longer acted like confused teenagers who had made a reckless decision. They became something darker, a group bound by secrecy, fear, and the horrifying knowledge that they had crossed a line they could never uncross. By morning, Emily hadn't slept. She sat curled in the corner of a spare room, the door cracked open just enough for the boys to check on her. Outside, early sunlight filtered through blinds coated with dust, painting thin stripes across the floor. Her throat ached. She kept whispering the same words to herself, barely audible, "Someone will come. Someone will find me." But back in Rosewood Heights, her parents assumed she had stayed late at a friend's house, something she occasionally did when working on group projects. It wasn't until noon the next day that her mother called the school and discovered Emily hadn't been in class at all. Panic set in. Police were contacted. A search began. But the boys heard the news too, Dylan scrolling through his phone, jaw tightening as he read the alert describing Emily's disappearance. Her missing person flyer showed her smiling softly, her hair tucked behind one ear. Logan swallowed hard. "We have to let her go." Dylan didn't answer immediately. His silence was heavy. Finally he said, "It's too late. They're already looking. If she talks, we're done." Those words sealed Emily's fate. She wasn't going home, not that day, not the next. Each hour that passed pulled her further into a nightmare she couldn't escape. The second night in the house felt longer than the first. Emily barely recognized herself anymore, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red and swollen, her voice reduced to broken whispers. She clung to small hopes, the hum of a passing car, footsteps outside, anything that suggested the world was still close enough to reach her. Inside, the boys' fear was growing. They were teenagers playing at being criminals, and the reality of what they had done was beginning to crush them. Logan paced the living room, running his hands through his hair again and again. "We can't keep her here," he said. "Someone's gonna notice. Someone's gonna hear." But Dylan only stared at Emily's missing person alert glowing on his phone. Her name was everywhere, local news, community pages, neighborhood alerts. A rising tide of panic surged across the town. "It doesn't matter," Dylan muttered. "We stick together. No one talks." He said it like he believed it, but his eyes betrayed the fear he refused to acknowledge. Meanwhile, Emily began testing the limits of her captivity. She learned the sounds of the house, the squeak of the back door's hinge, the way the floorboards creaked near the hallway, the rhythm of the boys' movements. She waited for chances, even the smallest ones. Late one night, she got one. Brent had forgotten to lock the door to the spare room. Emily pushed it open slowly, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She crept through the living room, breathing shallowly. The front door was just steps away. Salvation just steps away. But as she reached for the knob, a floorboard groaned beneath her foot. Kyle appeared from the kitchen, startled. "Emily?" She lunged for the door. His shout tore through the house as he tackled her onto the carpet. "Dylan!" Within seconds, the others were there. Emily screamed, her voice raw, desperate. For a moment her cries spilled out of the cracked front window and drifted into the neighborhood. And someone heard. A woman walking her dog paused, frowning. She listened again, the dog tugged at the leash, impatient. The woman shook her head, unsure. Maybe it was just the TV. Or teenagers yelling at each other. Or nothing at all. She walked on. Inside the house, Emily was dragged back to the spare room. Dylan slammed the door, his voice sharp with anger he barely controlled. "No more chances," he said, pointing at her with trembling hands. "Try that again and things will get worse." Emily curled into herself, shaking. She didn't want to believe him, but she could tell by the way he looked at her that something had shifted. The boys were unraveling, losing control, and she was trapped in the middle of their fear. The next morning, another intervention nearly succeeded, and failed again. Dylan's older cousin showed up unexpectedly, unlocking the front door with his key. The boys scattered, startled. Emily heard the unfamiliar voice and bolted upright, adrenaline flooding through her. "Yo, why's the place a mess?" the cousin called out. Emily rushed to the door of the spare room, pounding on it. "Help. Please." Immediately, Dylan clapped a hand over her mouth from behind and pulled her back, whispering harshly, "Quiet. Quiet." The cousin paused in the hallway. "What was that?" Kyle forced a laugh, stepping out with forced casualness. TV. Old horror movie." The cousin squinted at him. "Sounded like a girl." "Nah, man. Just bad acting." After a moment of indecision, the cousin shrugged and left. The door closed. His car engine rumbled away. Emily sank to the floor, her last hope slipping from her grasp. Every chance to escape was met with silence, disbelief, or the boys' frantic cover-ups. The world was still out there, but it wasn't hearing her. Days blurred into each other inside the dim, suffocating house. What began as panic became routine, not for Emily, who counted every passing hour with growing dread, but for the boys, who grew disturbingly accustomed to her presence. Their fear of getting caught twisted into irritation, then into a warped sense of control over her fate. Emily spent most of her time in the small spare room, where peeling wallpaper curled away from the walls and a draft slipped through the cracked window frame. Her once bright eyes took on a hollow look, and her voice, once gentle, weakened under stress and exhaustion. She tried to keep track of time by watching the changing light under the door, but even that became unreliable. Days passed. Nights stretched endlessly. Food was inconsistent. Some days they brought her leftovers, cold slices of pizza or a half-eaten sandwich. Other days, they forgot altogether. Her strength faded, but her will to survive flickered stubbornly. Outside, the town searched for her. Flyers covered lampposts. Volunteers combed wooded areas and empty lots. Emily's parents pleaded for leads during televised interviews, their voices cracking with fear. Police received dozens of tips, but most led nowhere. One officer even drove past the house where Emily was held, following up on a vague report of suspicious activity. He knocked on the door. Inside, panic ignited. Brent hissed, "We're done." "He knows. He knows." Dylan shoved him aside and opened the door with a steady, practiced calm. "Evening," the officer said. "We got a call about noise last night. Everything okay here?" "Yeah," Dylan replied smoothly. "Just some friends over. We keep it down after dark." The officer glanced past him. The house looked cluttered but harmless. No screams. No movement. No sign of the terrified girl sitting quietly in the spare room, hands over her mouth, praying he wouldn't leave. "All right," the officer said. "Just keep things under control." The door closed. Emily's faint hope closed with it. The boys were shaken for hours afterward. Logan wanted to release her right then, convinced the world was closing in. "She's dying in there," he whispered, voice tight with guilt. "This isn't what we meant to do." But Dylan shut him down. "If she goes out there, we're done. All of us." Fear kept them chained to a decision that none of them knew how to undo. As the weeks went on, Emily's condition worsened. She grew pale, weaker, unable to stand for long without leaning against the wall. Her lips were cracked, her vision blurry. She tried to ration whatever food she received, but her body was slowly surrendering. Nights were the worst. The sounds of the house, footsteps, arguments, doors slamming, pressed heavily on her mind. She began talking to herself quietly, not out of madness, but to keep her thoughts coherent. She recited her favorite book passages. She traced shapes on the floor with trembling fingers. She imagined her mother's voice calling her home. Meanwhile, the boys struggled with their guilt in different ways. Logan avoided the spare room entirely, unable to face what they were doing. Brent grew quiet, twitchy, jumping at every sound. Kyle numbed himself with distractions, games, music, anything to drown out the reality they had created. But Dylan changed the most. He hardened. He convinced himself he had no other choice. That letting Emily go was too dangerous. That survival, his own, and his group's, mattered more than anything else now. The others followed him, not because they believed him, but because fear had become stronger than conscience. By the time the 35th day arrived, Emily's body was weak, but her mind still clung to one fragile thread of hope: someone will come. Someone has to. But no one came. And the boys, consumed by fear and denial, did nothing, except watch her slowly fade inside a room no bigger than a closet. By the 6th week, the house felt less like a hideout and more like a pressure cooker, ready to burst at the slightest spark. Tension simmered in every room. The boys barely spoke to each other now, communicating in short, clipped sentences that revealed guilt, exhaustion, and fear. Emily, once filled with warm hope and soft dreams, now lay curled on the thin mattress in the spare room. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale. Even sitting up required effort. Her body had been pushed past its limits. Hunger, stress, and constant fear had taken a brutal toll. Yet, in quiet moments, she still whispered to herself, "Hold on. Hold on. Someone will find me." But her voice had become so faint that even she struggled to hear it. One particularly cold night, the draft slipping under the door chilled her to the bone. She shivered, pulling her knees to her chest. Her eyes fluttered open each time she heard footsteps, but her strength was slipping away like sand through fingers. Outside the room, the boys argued. Logan slammed his hands onto the table. "She needs a doctor. We can't pretend anymore. She's not going to make it." Brent stared at the floor, shaking uncontrollably. "This is our fault, we didn't mean." "Stop whining," Dylan snapped, though his voice trembled. "We're fixing this." "Fixing?" Kyle repeated weakly. "How?" "She's dying." Dylan's silence spoke louder than words. His face had hardened over the weeks, yet beneath the tough exterior was a terrified teenager drowning in consequences he never imagined. Still, his fear of being caught outweighed every flicker of remorse. Late that night, Dylan entered Emily's room alone. The dim light from the hallway barely lit her faint outline. She opened her eyes slowly when she heard the door creak. He knelt beside her, unsure of what to say. Her lips moved, trying to form words. "Please, let me go." Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely human. For the first time, Dylan's mask cracked. He looked away, jaw tightened, breathing quick and uneven. "I can't," he said. It was the closest he ever came to admitting regret. But he stood quickly, shutting the door harder than he meant to, as though sealing away his moment of weakness. By morning, Emily's condition had worsened. She drifted in and out of consciousness, barely aware of the world around her. The walls blurred. The floor tilted under her. Time slipped. When Logan checked on her just after sunrise, he froze in the doorway. Emily was lying still. Too still. He rushed to her side, shaking her gently. "Emily, hey, hey." No response. Her skin felt cold. "Dylan," he shouted, voice cracking. "Dylan, get in here." The others gathered at the door, staring at her small, unmoving form. For a long moment, no one spoke. The reality that they had been avoiding, the truth that had hovered just out of sight, had finally collided with them. Emily Carter was gone. Logan sank to the floor, sobbing. Kyle turned away, hands covering his face. Brent muttered, "No, no, no," over and over, like a broken record. Dylan stood frozen, expression blank. Shock washed over him, then something darker, calculation. "We can't call anyone," he said, voice low. Logan snapped. "What is wrong with you?" "She's dead, Dylan. She's dead because of us." "Because of you," Dylan shot back, deflecting blame. "We stick together or we go down together." The boys had crossed every line imaginable, and instead of pulling back, Dylan forced them to take one more horrific step. That afternoon, they obtained a large storage container from the garage. They worked in grim silence, lifting Emily's frail body with trembling hands. Kyle couldn't stop crying. Brent kept whispering apologies under his breath. Dylan instructed them with a cold efficiency that didn't match his age. "We fill it. Seal it. Drop it somewhere no one checks." The boys mixed concrete in a wheelbarrow behind the house. The sound of shovels scraping cement echoed through the yard like a grim metronome. When they poured the mixture into the container, the heavy gray slurry splashed onto their shoes, marking them with the weight of what they had done. They sealed the lid, loaded it into Dylan's car, and drove under cover of darkness to a wooded area miles from town. The headlights cut through the trees as they dragged the heavy container deep into the wilderness. A final shove sent it rolling down a small embankment where it landed with a muted thud, hidden by brush. It was finished. But secrets sealed in concrete don't stay hidden forever. Weeks passed with no sign of Emily, but the search never stopped. Her parents refused to let her name fade from local news. Community volunteers continued combing forests, abandoned buildings, and riverbanks. Candlelight vigils lit the evening streets, and her school left her desk untouched, a silent reminder of her absence. Meanwhile, the boys spiraled under the weight of the secret entombed in concrete. Logan barely slept. His hands shook constantly, and he avoided the others entirely. Brent drifted through his days in a fog of terror, jumping at every unexpected sound. Kyle tried to pretend life was normal, but guilt gnawed at him, tightening like a noose. Only Dylan maintained a facade of control, but even he sensed the walls closing in. Their downfall began with a mistake unrelated to Emily. 2 months after Emily's disappearance, police detained Dylan and Brent for vandalizing a convenience store, a reckless act born of stress and desperation. During questioning, officers noticed Brent's shaky demeanor and inconsistent answers. When detectives pressed harder, his composure crumbled. Within an hour, he cracked. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "We didn't mean for it to happen, she wasn't supposed to die." The room froze. Detectives leaned forward. "Who? What are you talking about?" And Brent began to tell the story. Authorities moved swiftly. Guided by his confession, search teams combed the wooded area where the boys had abandoned the container. It didn't take long. Half buried in overgrown brush, the concrete-filled box stood out like a monument to the tragedy inside. When investigators opened it, silence consumed the clearing. Even seasoned officers bowed their heads, shaken by the sight of the young girl whose disappearance had haunted the entire community. News broke within hours. Emily Carter had been found. Her parents received the call that evening. Though devastated, they finally had the truth, a truth that shattered them but freed them from unbearable uncertainty. Back in town, Dylan, Logan, Brent, and Kyle were arrested. Their young faces, once anonymous, now appeared on every news broadcast. Families across the region reeled at the revelation that teenagers could commit such an unthinkable act, and sustain it for so long. The trial began the following spring. Because the boys were minors, the courtroom allowed limited public access. Even so, the gallery was packed with reporters, grieving relatives, and silent community members searching for answers. The prosecution laid out the story piece by piece: the abduction, the prolonged captivity, the opportunities to save Emily that were ignored, and the callous attempt to conceal her death. Logan and Brent, filled with remorse, cooperated fully. Their testimonies were halting and tearful, describing the fear, guilt, and pressure that had pushed them deeper into Dylan's control. Kyle also admitted his involvement, his voice barely audible. But Dylan remained defiant. He sat straight-backed, expression cold, refusing to meet the Carter family's eyes. He claimed the others exaggerated. He argued that panic guided his decisions, not malice. But the evidence, combined with the boys' consistent accounts, buried his defense. In the end, all four were found responsible. Because they were minors, the sentences fell far short of what the public expected. They received lengthy juvenile detention terms, with the possibility of transfer to adult facilities depending on their behavior. The judge spoke solemnly of tragedy, wasted youth, and the irreversible harm inflicted on an innocent girl. Across the courtroom, Emily's parents held each other, grief-stricken but relieved to finally hear the word guilty. Rosewood Heights struggled to recover in the aftermath. Parents became more protective. Schools held assemblies on safety. The once quiet neighborhood carried a wound that would take years to heal. The house where Emily suffered was demolished within months, leaving behind an empty lot where grass grew unevenly, a quiet space the community chose not to discuss. At school, Emily's art teacher organized a memorial exhibit of her drawings. Soft pencil sketches of skies, meadows, and quiet landscapes filled the hallway, reminding everyone of the gentle spirit stolen too soon. Her parents created a foundation in her name, dedicated to missing and endangered children. They vowed that Emily's story would not fade into silence. And as the town slowly moved forward, one truth remained. A single moment of cruelty had taken a young girl's future, but the memory of who she was, brave, hopeful, kind, would outshine even the darkest acts committed against her. In the end, Emily Carter's legacy was not defined by the cruelty she endured, but by the light she left behind, a light no amount of darkness could ever truly erase.